Every October, the United States has recognized the voyage of the European explorers who first landed on the shores of the Americas. But that is not the whole story. That has never been the whole story. Those explorers ushered in a wave of devastation for tribal nations, perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading disease. We must not shy away from this shameful past, and we must shed light on it and do everything we can to address the impact of the past on Native communities today.
The indigenous people who were raping and murdering and pillaging and enslaving well before the Europeans showed up, those indigenous people, the Lakota and the Comanche, were incredibly violent. They scalped their enemies and burned children alive. The Mohawk and the Iroquois practiced cannibalism. Multiple tribes throughout Central and South America practiced human sacrifice. They were selling one another into slavery left, right, and sideways. Their civilization was thousands of years behind the rest of the world until some Europeans in boats showed up and were like, oh, by the by, here's what a road is. And now their descendants tweet angry comments about white people on smartphones from the comfort of a country that lets them say whatever they want and gives them the right to not be murdered by the guy in the next tribe over. But yes, those Europeans were terrible.
Yo, so we back in here for another edition of F-ya-Motha, and while y'all know I don't like Kamala Harris, I don't know who this real Britt Hughes is, but I'm trying to compartmentalize and break this shit down. First of all, ma'am, they knew exactly what the fuck a road was before the Europeans. And let me be more specific. Spaniards, while they were Europeans, let's be more specific, actually came to the Americas. And I find this disingenuous when people make this one to two comparison, right? It's not a one to one. What I mean by that is, just because the Iroquois and the Comanche were violent and did all that shit doesn't necessarily mean it gives the Europeans the right to be that. It's almost like somebody stealing and shooting people. Well, if I rob and shoot you, I'm doing the same thing he's doing. Yeah, it's kind of not the same, and it's not good. It's almost like if somebody sold crack to my mom and then I sell crack, and my argument is, well, they sell crack to her, so I might as well, because they're doing it. That makes me just as much a scumbag as them. Actually, it makes you more of a scumbag, because why would you go to somebody else's territory and join in on the melee? That's what I would like to know. Like, how much sense does that make? But let's get to the part where she was saying that they were doing all this stuff well before Columbus and the Europeans actually arrived. There's not heavily documentation that they were doing that, and they weren't doing that to the point where they were taking their land. They also didn't actually commit colonial antebellum slavery, right? Which was torturous, making somebody farm or harvest crops until they were 90, until they died. Sometimes slaves died in the field and they just scooped the body up and sent another one out there. They sent them to breeding farms and actually used their own offspring as replacements. I don't think that the indigenous people did that. Not only that, there's no record of them actually trading slaves. It's a falsity that a lot of clear people like to use. They like to say, well, Africans sold slaves to the Europeans. The indigenous people ain't African. They're Aboriginal. And while they do have melanated skin, or did, even Africans were tricked. The only reason they were trading slaves to Europeans was because they was giving them whiskey and guns. This is stupid. Like, anybody that tries to use this disingenuous argument either like is racist and has undertones of racism in a bloodstream, or they're just stupid. One of the two, man. You pick it. There's no documentation that they carried out colonial slavery. What kind of stupid ass shit is that? There's not even a documentation that he was going around and slaughtering people just for the sake of slaughtering people. Columbus killed damn near 750,000 indigenous people in the Americas, to the point where there's documentation of him, people in his crew documented that he would have them slaughter, rape, and pull the babies out of women that were already stabbed to death. That's inhumane, and I don't think that the Comanche, Iroquois, or Aztec people were doing it. Now, yeah, they did have their ceremonial rituals where they cut the chest open and pull a heart and give it to the gods, right? Everybody had their idiosyncrasies and their ritualistic shit that was based on the superstition. However, like I said, it goes back to the original point. Nobody said that it was a good idea to go to another place and join in on the bullshit. Like, if they're already doing that, why would you dogpile on that? Unless you're sadistic. And as far as her saying that this is the only country that gives us the right to text and tweet crazy stuff from the conference at our own home. No, man, we actually fought for that right too. And I don't mean just civil rights where people did sit-ins and got beat down in the streets. There were also riots. You might want to read about them. There were riots in New Jersey and Watts and parts of New York, Detroit, where black people burned shit to the ground, sort of like they did during 2020. So yeah, it was either we keep burning stuff or you guys make concessions. The American government made concessions in 1964, gave us the Civil Rights Act. Nobody gave a shit. We had to fight for that. I know the history books like to teach you this one-sided thing where we just held hands and saying we shall overcome. No, we burned shit. In Cairo, Illinois, they was actually snipering police officers from the top of the roofs to the point where all white people were left from that city. You might really read a book. And for all you racists that's going to come in the comments talking about I didn't prove her wrong, you might also want to read a book. In any event, if you like this episode, know what to do. Leave it in the comments and I'm out.